It's been 13 long years in the making. All the banter, all the bickering, all the conversations on social media led up to tonight at Kyle Field. And the game itself did not disappoint. Texas clinches its spot in the SEC title game in year one of the conference. Welcome on into SEC Unfiltered. He's Dave Shumate. I'm Cole Thompson, breaking down everything that we saw at Kyle Field as the Longhorns prevail against the Aggies 17-7. Real quickly, make sure that you like the video, hit that ring notification, and smash the subscribe button because we're talking all things SEC throughout the college football playoff. More importantly, we're going to get you prepared for next week's battle as Texas travels down to the ATL to take on Georgia in the rematch of what happened on the 40 acres. Make sure that you download the podcast version of the show wherever you get your podcast listening systems. Follow Dave at Mach 10 Sports, me at Mr. Cole Thompson. Follow us at SEC Unfiltered, and make sure you check out all of our great work found at SEC Unfiltered. This post-game show is brought to you by our friends over at RHOBACK. The holiday season is right around the corner, and what better gift to give someone in your life than a RHOBACK pullover, a RHOBACK hoodie, a RHOBACK fleece, a RHOBACK pair of pants, whatever you see fit. It is a perfect stocking stuffer for those that matter most to you. And right now, you can go to RHOBACK.com and use the promo code SECU for 20% off your first purchase. So basically, SEC Unfiltered is giving you an opportunity to give to your family this holiday season. See how kind we are with that? Go to use the promo code SECU at purchase at RHOBACK.com. 20% off your very first purchase. Dave, I'm going to get sentimental for a moment because I have been waiting for this game since 2011. When I was going away to college, I remember that I had to understand this game was not going to be on my television screen. I was going to enjoy the Iron Bowl. I was going to enjoy the Egg Bowl. I was going to enjoy the battle between Florida and Florida State. And as somebody that grew up in the Lone Star State, it was hard for me to actually buy on in, to believe that this game was not going to be back. And it came back. And it was worth every single agonizing moment to not be able to have it on my television screen. It was worth every single sleepless November night, realizing that this game should have been played and it wasn't. And more importantly, I think for a lot of people out there, you figured out that this Texas team, as much as we want to gripe about their schedule, as much as we want to gripe about the fact that they quote-unquote hadn't played anybody of prominence, as much as we want to talk about this team having its woes on offense, its lulls, its inability to be able to capitalize inside the red zone at times, they left no doubt defensively that once again, if you want to win, you have to, number one, have depth, and number two, have faith in your team. And one side of the football has got to be dominant. This is, for my money, the most elite defense in the SEC. And without a doubt, it is a reason why if they hoist up a national championship, Steve Sarkisian can sit on the 40 acres, smile, and say, we won because of our D.
Yeah, no, I mean, you got to give the defense credit. Definitely Vernon Broughton. We're recruiting him when I was working at Texas A&M. Phenomenal family. I thought his mom and sister were freaking awesome. Glad to see him step up. Again, they're not Byron Murphy, T'Vondre Sweat, but definitely I think they've overachieved compared to everybody's expectations. I don't think anybody thought they'd be bad, but I mean, they've definitely stepped up. And I think two things to be true. One's the best offense they played. I mean, who would you say? I mean, Georgia, they've been a little inconsistent, but I think Texas's offense across the board is better than it was last year for sure. Just kind of think the secondary play so much better. It's almost like a sliding scale. They're giving up a little from that front seven from last year. I don't think they're as good there, but I don't think it's by a huge margin, but they're definitely better on the back end. So I think overall, Pete Kwiatkowski and them, PK and them did a good job game planning against Texas A&M offense. Just could not stretch the field vertically, but it's like a lot of people predicted Georgia, Texas in the SEC championship game. A rematch next week. Both teams in the college football playoff really just fighting for seed at that point. Fighting for, granted, it'll be interesting who would get the one seed if Penn State beats Oregon. That'll be the interesting part there. So
I don't want to think about that.
How far back does the loser go in the season?
I genuinely do not want to think about that, mainly because of it feels like a moot point at this moment. That the fact that we have to have that conversation, so long as one of these two win, they should feel like the number one seed if Oregon loses, and then the number two seed if Oregon wins. I mean, that's the case. But Texas, again, the domination at the very beginning of the game, the fact that they were able to establish the run, the fact that they were able to connect on a couple of big-time shots, whether that be to Matthew Golden, whether that be to Gunnar Helm, whether that be to Isaiah Bond, They were able to truly set the tone. I think that was the big difference in this matchup. Also, I thought the fact was is that you had a run game, a stable run game. Quinn Wisner has been somebody that we have been waiting to see live up to the expectation as the legit number 2 running back. And tonight, he was number 1. I mean, no questions whatsoever. And they did not consider ever taking the ball out of his hands. 33 carries, 186 yards, 5.6 yards per run. This was the tone setter. And more importantly, when he didn't have those step backs, whenever he wasn't being pushed back and he was instead moving forward in the right direction, that's where you realize that this team could be dangerous. They set up the run to utilize the pass. They put themselves in great situations in that first half, whether it be a 3rd and 2, whether it be a 3rd and 3, a 2nd and 1, a 2nd and 4. That way they were able to connect with Gunnar Helm, connect with Matthew Golden, connect with Isaiah Bond, connect with Silas Bolden, connect with Ryan Wingo. I thought overall this was one of those games where they had a good execution on what they wanted to be offensively.
Yeah, I thought Texas handled. I thought they would be a little more rattled coming in with the snap count, and A&M being able to tee off of that. They did. They handled that really well right out of the gate, in my opinion. That's what stood out of it initially right off of this is how Texas came out and handled the just overall pressure of the game. Quinn Ewers looked a little precise, like precision, like a surgeon a little bit. You thought you were looking back on kind of his performance in Alabama last year, Tuscaloosa, and then Ann Arbor earlier this year. He had that kind of comfortability to him. I like how they mixed in Arch Manning. I like how you're mixing in that. I think that's a good kind of an extra thing to make defenses prepare for at the very least. So I think that's good. Overall, like business type. I mean, I feel like it was a game you never really thought A&M was going to really win. Like I thought it could come down to the end, but there was never a moment where you're like, A&M's going to win this. Like it just kind of felt like the offense was just never going to muster up. Texas was going to always make stops on defense. I always felt Texas was kind of in control in here. And I think in that impressive environment, very big win for the Texas Longhorns. 11-1. It's no doubt now. Nobody has to talk about if they get in at 10-2.
No, but at the same time, you couldn't doubt they were going to be in at 10-2. The way that college football and the last 2 weeks have gone, this was a team that was always going to punch their ticket. The question was, would they have to play that one more extra game to get the first round bye? Would they be hosting a playoff game? That's really what it was, because if you weren't ever going to leave out Texas at 10-2 for a 9-3 Alabama or a 9-3 Ole Miss team, because of even with Texas' schedule, they still showed you who they were. And I think that's the part that so many people left out, Dave, is that this is a Texas defense that is unafraid to deliver performances and be the backbone of this roster. Every single week, I sit here and I wonder, what is going to be the fault? What is going to be the mistake? Where are we going to see Texas fumble the bag defensively? Is it going to be on an explosive, big-time 28-yard score by one wide receiver that we aren't talking about? Is it going to be the inability to tackle in the open field to lead to a couple of big first-down runs, and then eventually it caps off with a victory? Is it going to be the instability with a couple of pass interference calls or a targeting or anyone? But that's not Texas. Texas, to me, this year, with all the new transfers that came on in, understood we have to be a unit that will catapult our offense to new heights by not having them be the focal point. And so many people have been focused in on what Quinn Ewers can't do, on what Quinn Ewers is supposed to be, on what this running back room is supposed to be, on why these wide receivers aren't connecting at the same level. But you look at this defense, and once again, they're not afraid to deliver shots. They play clean football. You don't ever see them get penalized. The Andrew Makuba, targeting call, I thought it was egregious from the get-go because if you watch him, he doesn't lead with his head. He leads with the shoulder. That's a legal play. They play a mature version of football that never gives them doubt. And I think that's going to be something that carries a lot of weight going into next week's game against Georgia. It's going to be something that carries a lot of weight going into the college football playoff. Because yes, this offense does have its lulls, and more importantly, this offense does have its faults. You know what Quinn Ewers can and can't be, and we got to talk about the red zone turnovers, because that's a big deal. It's a very big deal against a very studious and stout Texas A&M front seven. But regardless of that, this is still a very mature defense that will say, you make a mistake, we'll rebound. You fumble the bag, we'll get the ball right back. You mess up, we'll respond. And that's something that has been on display, I think, every single week since the Georgia game. And now it's reached its full pinnacle to where we have to say, you want to know why Texas is ranked number 3? It's not simply because of they have one loss next to their name. It's because their defense has delivered on every sense of the word. And more importantly, it's a reason why you can believe in them to go deep into the postseason.
Yeah. I mean, again, I'm not going to overreact, just like the Georgia-Tennessee game. You won this week. I'm not going to say anyone's going deep in the playoffs quite yet. I'm just not ready to admit that. I feel like I've learned my lesson. Again, I think we were all hyping up Georgia after the Tennessee game. We saw what happened last night. They could get beat on any given day. We've seen how Texas has played against Kentucky. We've seen how Texas has played against Arkansas. We've seen how Texas has played against Georgia. They could lose on a given night. That's not taking away anything what they did tonight. I just think at this point, I'm not projecting people to go deep in that playoff. It's week to week. You game plan, and it's matchups make fights. That is what it is right now. Texas has its holes, just like other teams do. I'm not ready to crown them yet just off that win. Dominant win, I'll give you that. But I'm not ready to crown them as a semifinal team just off of performance. What I saw last week, they struggled too. I just think as a whole of the sport, it's not a Texas thing. It's just I think it's week to week in college football now. The matchup this next week, I don't think is a great one for them. And I think matchups make fights. We saw the first time this go around in this matchup, and I think that's where they struggle with that. But I think they will have a chip on their shoulder in this one. I think they'll be a little more motivated than Georgia, obviously. You get your teeth kicked in one time. You get a rematch, be a little more motivated.
I'm not saying that Texas is going to win out and go to the national championship. I'm not saying any of those things. What I'm saying is that their defense is good enough to keep them in every single game and give their offense an opportunity.
Texas and Tennessee are very similar. I think Texas has a higher upside offensively, though. I think that's where I would give them the nod.
I would at least say that when you look at the way their rushing attack is and the way their wide receivers don't drop many passes, you probably give them a slight advantage.
And Quinn Ewers over Nico.
Yeah, but that's a veteran thing. But at the same time, we got to talk about Quinn Ewers because there are problems. There are many a problem. In fact, there are egregious problems when it comes to the red zone. The fact that you had a fumble, the fact that you had an interception, there are two things that can be true. The first thing is, I don't understand Sark's play calling. Like Sark inside the red zone, when you can be up 20-0, why are you trusting a quarterback that, number one, is not at full capacity? And yes, you did see him utilize his legs. Yes, you did see him be able to tuck and run. Yes, you did be able to see him to deliver deep shots and throw off the back foot. So all that aside, he wasn't like at 50%. And then again, you had some design runs in play to where Arch Manning, he's the one that scores the first touchdown in the Lone Star Showdown in 13 years. Like, who wrote that on the bingo card and thought that was going to happen?
No, you're right there. You're right, Barry. That's like a fairy tale Disney movie.
But like at the same time, when you think about this, you have an opportunity to go up 20-0. Your defense is delivering. They would have pitched a shutout. It would have been 20-0 final score if Will Lee does not get the ball that is tipped to the line of scrimmage and runs it back 98 yards. And again, credit to Will Lee. He has been a phenomenal cornerback and one of the best underrated players in the SEC all year long. I wonder if he's going to be able to come back next year. Regardless, he has made himself some money if he goes to pros. But you realize that that's a bad play design. And this is not the first time. It happened last year in Big 12 play with Steve Sarkisian that he got too cute inside the red zone and decided, let's run this trick play. Let's run this trick play. Guys, this is the Lone Star Showdown, the first one in 13 years. Just finish the job, get into the end zone however you see fit. Field goal, touchdown, safety, and call it a day. You don't need to go ahead and make two things close for comfort. And then the fumble. I mean, that was an egregious play to where, yes, I understand Quinn Ewers is trying to slide and get the first down or just slide to get it, stop the clock. But you have to protect the football, man. And these are things that are going to be critical mistakes when you get into the playoffs. What happens if this occurs, say, in the fourth quarter against an Oregon squad at home? Like, that's a bad look for you. You got to be able to play, I think, a more consistent game. And more importantly, these have been some problems when it comes to the hindrance of Quinn Ewers this year, where, yes, there are a lot of positives. Yes, he knows how to utilize his legs. Yes, he's able to go ahead and put himself in a great position to score. But also, he puts the ball in harm's way. It's very similar to Jalen Milroe, where when one turnover begins, another one is not that far behind, and you're just sitting holding your breath hoping our defense can get the ball back. We don't have to worry about it. It's a mistake. Move on.
No, you are right. Quinn Ewers is a guy. It's like he builds up some momentum with his turnovers. Barry, it's a little bit like, you're right. You see one, it's almost like, next one's coming. It's almost like a kicker. It has to start off well. It's like if he sees one go through, he's good for the game. If he misses one, oh God, it's all over the place. Like the whole operation better. You're right. Quinn Ewers has that a little bit in him, but he also kind of has the surgical, like Dexter serial killer mentality, where the guy just goes out there and just this like the precise precision surgeon that you've seen in Ann Arbor, Tuscaloosa, and at least at the very beginning to start with tonight. I mean, I know they weren't lighting them up, but it just kind of felt like Texas was pushing all the right, but it wasn't too big for them. I thought they would struggle a little bit with the noise, and I mean. Of course, I mean the first drive or two, but again, I'm not when we really settled in that game that you started to kind of feel them out. But you're right, Bear. The whole story to this Longhorn season is it's been carried by the defense for the whole season for the most part. The offense has had its moments. The offense has struggled, but the one consistent for Texas this whole year. And you're right. If they were to win the national championship, I would agree with you. If you gave me one reason why, it would be because that defense would keep them in every game. I mean, if there's two defenses in the SEC out of the playoff, I'd say the three teams that are for sure in the playoff right now from the SEC: Tennessee, Texas, and Georgia. The two I trust, it would probably go in order of Texas, Tennessee, Georgia, honestly. And I think you can make a case for Tennessee at 1 too. I think Georgia's third is for sure out of those three.
Of defenses, yes. Especially after last night's performance, I think it's like a guarantee they are third. But I think the other thing that's really important here is that when Quinn Ewers was on, he was on. Like that to me is a big deal. That 44-yard pass to Matthew Golden. I mean, if you make that against Oregon, we're talking about him as a potential, I would say not day one starter at the NFL level or even a first round pick, but we are talking about him as a guy that continues to grow, mature, show that he is more than just this kind of connective surgical slice and dice, break it apart guy. He is not afraid to take those deep shots down the field. Gunnar Helm, again, has been one of the most underappreciated players all year in college football, and he showed up again tonight on multiple occasions, 4 first down conversions, including 2 for 15-plus yards. That's a guy that I am very much trying to take out next week if I'm Georgia. That is a guy that when I'm in the playoffs, I cannot have him as a security blanket because of Quinn, when they connect, it just feels like not cinema, but it feels like it is a very good like it's like biscuits and gravy. You know the two go together and that when it works, it is perfectly harmonious. You don't have to worry about much because if it's going to flow. I think the same thing goes for a guy like Matthew Golden because Golden, again, has been one of the more underappreciated players in college football this year. He leads Texas in receiving yards, in receptions. He leads Texas in receiving touchdowns. And people kind of forgot about him because he wasn't the prominent name, even though he was a former all Big 12 player at the University of Houston last year. He was great when it came to inside the red zone. He was great on special teams. This year, he has been the target that you want to bring in inside the 20 and be able to capitalize with. And I think that's going to play a lot of dividends in the future, especially for this team. Quinn had his moments. He's basically the Jekyll Hyde of college football quarterbacks. And that's the problem, is that you would rather have him either be Mr. Hyde and it be completely off the rails, all the problems whatsoever, than Dr. Jekyll for like a quarter. But tonight was a perfect emulant of that, where in the beginning of the game, he was unafraid to deliver those deep shots down the field, capitalize on those quick strikes, more importantly, put his team in at least a consistent position to score, where in the second half, he was kind of the reason why Texas A&M was hanging around a little bit too close for comfort.
No, I 100% agree. Bear, what do you think they could actually – where do you think Texas could be better in this next game against Georgia compared to where they were in the last game? I mean, I think for me, you got to get off to a better start. I mean, now, granted, they got a turnover right off. Carson Beck had 3 turnovers. It's just – if you're Texas, obviously you're going to have a better game plan offensively. I think your defense played fine enough to win that game. They played well enough to win that game against Georgia.
You mean against Georgia? Yeah, they did.
I mean, you could keep the same thing. And again, me and you talked about Georgia's racked up some injuries since then. I mean, Texas could probably – I think they'll be fine defensively. That game, and I think you would agree, just sitting here reacting to it quickly, just off the top of my head before we both prepare to give our predictions for it, which is wild to say. We're already in the SEC championship game in December.
I know.
Nuts. The key will be how well does this Texas run game get going against a Georgia defense that you just talked about got ran on pretty heavily on Saturday. Now, granted, a lot of that, there was the quarterback run game. You're not going to see a lot of that with Quinn Ewers, but you could see it with Arch a little bit. It kind of brings the same dynamic that Haynes King brought in. I think that could be the difference. If I'm Texas and you tell me we run the football a lot better against Georgia's time, I think we probably win the football game.
No, I think the other thing that's really important here is you have to have a game plan for Arch. Like whether that be just simply design runs inside the red zone, whether that be quick strikes from the 40-yard line to get the tempo moving again. You have to have a game plan for Arch Manning because of when he is on the field, you are going to have to prepare for him. And he can beat you in a multitude of ways. It's why they got out to a 7-0 lead. Michael Taft again, another guy that creates turnovers. Jahdae Barron, another guy that creates turnovers. You can do that in Atlanta. I don't think it's going to be a problem. I think that when you're inside the red zone, not shooting yourself in the foot with these self-inflicting wounds is going to be really big. Dave, let's go ahead and talk about Texas A&M. A&M had a good year. I think that a lot of people are going to look at this and say, well, we didn't go to the SEC championship. We're probably going to finish 9-4, 8-5. We may or may not be ranked in the AP or college football playoff poll. We lost to South Carolina. We lost to Notre Dame. We lost to Texas. We lost to Auburn. And then you have to realize this is year one for Mike Elko, who has established a culture that when you went up against one of the best defenses in college football, you bent, but you didn't break. You had an early interception, and yet the offense was still able to capitalize. Just some minor bad play calling at times that allowed you to go miss it on 4th and short rather than take the easy points. A couple of plays that probably you would rather have back, a few penalties here and there. It's not much to complain about. You have the foundation, and you and I have talked about this many a time. When I look at a team, when they build their roster up, year one is about establishing a culture. Year two is about laying down the foundation and leaving no doubt. Year three is where you swing for the fences. It's year one. Culture's established. Most of the foundation, I think, is in place. But also, I think it's abundantly clear. Marcel Reed, if you keep him, I completely understand it. He fits Colin Klein's system. He's a good quarterback. Do you think that you can win an SEC championship with him? And if you don't, you have to have the hard conversation in the offseason. What are we willing to spend in the transfer portal to at least bring in competition? Because Connor Wegman is not going to be back next year. Wigman's going to be off in the transfer portal. After the night when you were struggling in the first half to unable to find an identity on offense, the fact that you never went to him was the indicator he is redshirting as much as possible. He is trying to not hurt himself, put himself in a bad situation. He's going to be gone next year. So you can run it back with Reed. You can run it back with Miles O'Neal, the 2024 recruit. You can run it back with the guy that you just recently picked up, the Michigan recruit, that flipped at the last second. But I think that you need a veteran on this staff, somebody to compete with Marcel Reed, simply because of I'm not sure Reed can get you past this 9-3, 10-2 record. And 9-3 and 10-2 is good, but you're A&M and you're trying to compete for SEC titles. Tonight was a very perfect performance of where when Reed was unable to connect with his arm, it was abundantly clear that teams were going to feast on him and put him behind the sticks.
Yeah, I don't think A&M's future quarterback, to your point, Cole, about winning the SEC championship is currently on the roster. I think a lot of people would probably agree with that, probably them even internally. Would be shocked if both Marcel Reed and Connor Wigman are in College Station in the spring. Who do you go get out of the portal? That's the big question. That's the big question mark right there. Like, who is it? Like, there's not a quarterback obviously out there. Granted, the portal hasn't really been open for very long. No one's announced. But you're right, Bear. I mean, it's got to be somebody. Because, I mean, that's like you said, that's the goal at Texas A&M. Can they win you a national championship? Can they beat Texas? Like, that's who you got to kind of compare yourself to. Again, you don't want to just say we're chasing them because it's faceless opponents. But, like, how do we go get to Atlanta? We were a game away. You could easily say we were a quarterback short. Yeah, the defense have its issues at times, sure, but their defense kind of kept them along. And I'm with you. Great first year for Mike Elko. 8-4, I think a realistic first year. Yeah, but he loved to have Notre Dame and Auburn back. Yeah, absolutely. Just like a lot of coaches and teams in this league would have loved to have a game or a couple of plays back this season. But I think 8-4, you tell me if I'm wrong, Bear. I think the way he handled the quarterback position, I think was good. It was almost like he was on 18 at the blackjack table and just kept hitting the table, and the threes just kept popping out for weeks on end. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He was playing it well. He was playing it really well. Like,
I would say the dealer busted more so than he was hitting on. He was hitting 21 every single time. The dealer just went over every single time.
I just feel like it was kind of like a little luck, but he was playing it well where it was kind of like, okay, you're Wigman struggling against LSU. Damn, dude, you made the call. That's a big balls. That's a ballsy call to decide to go to Marcel Reed in the second half. It's, hey, I kind of chestnut checkered Drinkowitz into Connor Wigman playing. It's like he was making all the right moves early, but I think we even saw it after the LSU game. I think we all knew there was a ceiling to this offense with Marcel Reed. Remember, we were all like, I mean, dude, at some point, if you don't have a vertical passing game, like there's a ceiling to this offense. And I think tonight is a perfect example. I mean, last week I thought they played decent against Auburn as a solid defense. But again, Texas is a really good defense, one of the best in college football. So you're going to have a vertical passing game, and PK and them had a phenomenal game plan.
If it is not one of the best, it is the best in college football. Like that's how dangerously lethal Texas's defense can be. And again, I brought this up in the preview. You're going to rely heavily on number 10 to be the guy. Because if you didn't have you didn't have Le'Veon Moss anymore. And also, you got back Reuben Owens, and that's a big deal because of the fact that now you have a stable number 2 running back alongside Amari Daniels is fine. But keep in mind, this is a guy that got hurt in the very beginning of fall practice, and finally was healthy enough to be limited to a handful of reps here and there. I mean, he had 3 carries for 10 yards. That was his night. Like, it wasn't like he was coming out and being the version that we saw last year as the number 3 tailback behind Daniels and Moss. This is a guy that is still trying to work his way back to full capacity, and it's going to be great in 2025. I don't think anybody doubts that. But you lost one of your best assets in the run game. You put an emphasis on Marcel Reed having to be one of, if not the major factor in the run game. It's why he led the team in rushing attempts and in yards, 14 for 60, 4.3 yards per play, 2 runs of over 20-plus yards downfield. But the other part that was really, really important was you didn't build that relationship with the wide receivers consistently in the first half. And then when you were finally able to kind of get a little bit of emotion, Texas was prepared, and they got a couple of big-time third-down conversion stops. You had a punt, ball went back to Texas offense, and they milked the clock as much as possible. With an offense headlined by Marcel Reed, in this first year, kind of learning on the ropes, I think that you'd be okay saying 8-4 was a prominent thing, but you wouldn't want him to have to go out and win you a football game. He was the reason you were either going to win or lose tonight. And it was abundantly clear that once they got that defensive touchdown, momentum started to shift in favor of Texas A&M. But as soon as they got the second turnover where Quinn Ewers was inside the red zone, he fumbled the ball, that was a moment where you need to see Marcel Reed punch it in. And they were so close. But then they decided to go for it on 4th down. That is going to be something that I really wonder, will Mike Elko think about it long past tonight? Maybe not for a year, but maybe for a few weeks. What if I kick the field goal and it's 17-10 and I get that stop? And my defense gets me one more drive that I feel confident win. Shoulda, coulda, woulda. It's all hindsight 2020. But still, those are some moments that you sit back and wonder how this game could have differed if maybe I wouldn't have been so aggressive. Because aggressiveness sometimes works. It also is the reason why sometimes you also walk away with an L.
Yeah, I agree as well. I think you said it well.
When you look at Texas right now, they feel like a team that I wouldn't say is going to win the SEC championship, go on an epic run to the college football playoff, and hoist up a national title. But what I think that we can say is there's no doubt. Like, there's none anymore. This is a great defense. This is an offense that was able to hold its own against multiple teams. This is a run game that is very studious up front. It has a great offensive line. I'm going to wonder about the status of Kelvin Banks. He did leave early. He didn't come back for the second half. That's going to be critical, I think, especially against what Jalen Walker can do. That's what Michael Williams can do. Malachi starts on the blitzes. What it can happen when you play against maybe a potential Oregon or an Ohio State or another prominent team that's going to be in the college football playoff. But they showed you tonight that this is one of the more complete rosters in the sport. And even though you have your questions when it comes to Quinn, because again, first half, fine. Second half, there's a ton that needs to get cleaned up. I feel like that you at least can understand this is a team that you don't want to go to war with when they're on their P's and Q's.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think they're in a group of a pretty good amount of teams. I think they could win the national championship and could beat anybody on a given day, like you said, because the defense keeps them in it. No, I mean, I think Texas has as good a shot as anybody to win the national championship.
When you look right now, would you say Texas top 5 team going into the college football playoff or middle 5 team?
middle 5 or top 5. I would say they're a top 5 team for sure.
I would say top 5.
If you're making me rank the top 5 teams, I would go them.
Again,
I put them in that for sure.
Again, when you're able to average, 4.8 yards per play against this Texas A&M front, when you're able to utilize your ground game, when you have Trey Wisner being your bell cow back, when you have Arch Manning setting the tone, when you're able to get Quinn Ewers to utilize his legs, when your defense doesn't give up a touchdown, when your offense is able to at least win on third down, it's really challenging not to think that this team can't go deep into the playoffs. And again, I'm not going to predict it. Dave's not going to predict it. We're not going to say that Texas will win the national championship. They got to get the job done next week in Atlanta. But I do feel like the way that they looked right now, there is enough to believe that when people say they're posers, they don't know why they're ranked at the top 12, you can kind of just shoo them away. I'm sorry. Because I still think that when this defense delivers, it is the best in college football. When this offense is humming, it is a top 20 offense in college football. And they can beat you in multiple facets. The other thing that's really important, though, Dave, and we watched it tonight, especially inside the 20, they can beat themselves. And at the end of the day, we may be talking about Texas losing in the playoff, not because they were the inferior team, not because if they had too many issues to where an opponent just dominated them. It's because they had the self-inflicting wounds that eventually kept a team too close for comfort. And at the very last second, they pulled away.
Yeah. No, I think you said it.
Like, rate, review, subscribe. Make sure that you follow us on all the social channels, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter at SEC Unfiltered. Download the podcast version of the show where you have to get your podcast listening systems. Make sure that also you hit that ring notification. Now, why is the bell really important? Well, Dave Shumate, myself, and Chris Phillips will be back tomorrow morning, 9:30 Central, 10:30 Eastern, for those of you that are on the East Coast time, to break down everything that we saw in rivalry weekend preparing for the SEC Championship. And again, you want to be able to keep up to date with everything that we do on the channel. Dave Talks Ball, the Monday Morning Power Hour, the live college football playoff reactions come Tuesday. It's the second to last one. And then on Sunday next week, we're going to be doing a live, probably 2-hour show breaking down everything that happened. So you're not going to want to miss it. So why not hit that ring notification? That way you don't miss out. Make sure that also you're subscribed to the channel, and make sure that you follow us on Twitter at Mockton Sports and at Mr. Cole Thompson. For Dave Shumate, I am Cole Thompson. The Lone Star Showdown is back. And more importantly, college football is back to what it was meant to be. Have a beautiful night. Peace.